Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a pair of bins that have European nightcrawler worms living in them. And these worms have been working on a nice meal they got 10 days ago, some pear, some strawberry I think, maybe some coffee. And what I've got for them today is peach. So my mom tells me that our neighbor's got a peach tree, which, the neighbor was kind enough to share some peaches with her, but they weren't really very tasty. So I got a couple peaches for the worms from my mom, compliments of my mom's neighbor. So the systems are right over here behind me. They're 150 days of age today. European nightcrawler bins in these two black tubs. And let's see, what else? They got feeding number 13 last time 10 days ago, so feeding number 14 is going in now. Let's get a glove on, get the systems up on the bench, and get them fed. As I was carrying the systems over to the bench here, I was reminded of the other thing that they received last time as part of their feeding, which was some moldy bread. And I really feel like I'm down to the end of this package of moldy bread. So I'm just going to give them the last of it. There's like maybe 3 or 4 slices in there, although 1 or 2 of those slices might be the very end, which is just a tiny fraction of the size of the larger slices. So maybe we'll combine the largest and the smallest slice, and the 2 medium systems will go to their own separate systems. So last time we took a single feeding zone indicator and tore it in half to share because we only had that one. I guess the one that was in the other bin, whichever bin it was so far gone. But you'll remember we got replacement feeding zone indicators. So these pieces of paper here are not feeding zone indicators anymore. They're just going to become supplementary bedding down in the feeding zones. And I guess the other stuff that's going to end up getting blended in is all this leafy matter that was spread out across the top surface. That's also going to now go from being a pretty top dressing to being incorporated into the material and turning into nice bedding that the worms can now actually start making some better use of. So yeah, we were pretty generous on the leaves, I see, last time. And if I don't forget, we could be generous again today. I've got my box of leaves right here next to me. And once in a while I bump into something that doesn't feel like a leaf stem. All these other large objects that I give a pass to and leave them in are all leaf stems. That's par for the course if you're using leaves. But every now and then when I do hit a stick, an actual stick, not a leaf stem, then I get in the habit of removing it because it just doesn't seem like the sort of thing that's going to go anywhere. Perhaps if the system were really, really young, perhaps the entire lifespan of the system would be sufficient for something like that to break down, but in most cases I assume that a stick is not going to get broken down in any of my worm bins, so I just get in the habit of removing them when I see them. So I remember I put a half of a pear and a slice of bread being smack in the middle here, and I did wonder if 10 days was enough, like short enough of a period of time that we might come back soon enough to find the worms still working on it, but I'm getting the feeling like the chance for that to happen might have been a few days ago already. It's funny because I've got another system where I fed apples, and a lot of people consider apples and pears to be a very similar kind of a food, because after all they are very similar in appearance and stuff like that, how they grow and whatnot. But it seems to me like pears go 1, 2, 3 in the worm bins, whereas apples tend to sit around and have a very, very slow breakdown process. So now I'm getting something gushy here, and I'm wondering what it is that it might be. It might be what remains of half the pear. It's the only thing that was in here big enough to have a leftover, such as this, something this size. So I do believe we did actually just find a little bit of leftover pear. And who knows, maybe I was rough, perhaps I broke it, maybe there's another chunk of it floating around in here, but I'd like to think that they've probably done away with it. That's probably the better explanation as to why we only found that little piece. And, well, very similar in size, I would say, to something like this, too. So, compared to something like that, maybe half of it is remaining still. Well, this time 2 are going in, not just 1. So, they're going to have the leftovers of the pear to work on, and now also a couple fresh chunks of fruit in the peaches. Who knows, maybe the peaches are going to be more to their liking and they'll just abandon the pear. And we'll come back next time, whenever that may be, and find the pear still sticking around and no signs of peaches, just a pit. Yeah, so my guess is that by the time we come in here next time, we'll either just find the pit stripped clean of all the vegetable, fruity matter, whatever, on it, or we might have to let it go a second round, let them continue working on it. So this is also a pretty good sized chunk of something, but you know, yeah, I could tell. You could probably hear it too, just from the way it's cracking as I open it. This is half of a mango seed, because you know, the mango seed has like its outer husk and the seed is actually inside, and the worms have definitely discovered this mango seed because they're jammed into the shell, or the husk, or whatever it's called, that the mango seed is in to protect it. But looks like we barged in on a little seed worm party. Oh, I was wondering why this one little wormy was thrashing back and forth the way he was, and I just noticed I was pressing up against him to force the husk to kind of open up a little bit better. So apologies to our little wormy friend. Oh, now that we've opened it up, we can see a little bit better what's going on inside. They really seem to like it. So yeah, I think with this one I had just managed to cut a very small, tiny chunk of it off, and that husk probably ended up over in the other system, but this system got the majority of the actual seed inside of it for the worms to work on, and they're definitely enjoying it. So far I've not bumped into anything that would appear to be leftovers of the pear, but that's fine by me. That is the whole idea, that they consume what they're given, and perhaps 10 days is a little bit soon to come back. In most cases I've got 12, 14 day gaps in between feedings, but I've somehow managed to get caught up. And as long as I am caught up, I'm thinking, well, let the wormies reap the benefit of that by getting check-ins that occur a little bit earlier than they normally would otherwise. So let's see how long let's see how long that streak lasts, because at some point I do plan to just not feed any worm bins, take a short break for a day or two, and then next time we check in on probably the next of my systems, it might be a little bit more than a 10-day interval in between feedings, because I believe I'm due for a little R&R. So let's get to feeding. We've got the bread, which I don't want to forget because it's sitting in my kitchen for the longest time. Me walking past it every other time I come to feed the worm bins, instead of actually giving it to the worms, I just kind of forget about it and leave it there on the kitchen counter. This time it seemed to me like there was just enough remaining at this point to just do away with all of it, and that's what we're going to do today. Let's bring in these peaches. The peaches are starting to soften up. I mean, they were so frozen I had a tough time even opening them up, to, you know, cutting them open in half this way, because they were like a block of ice. Luckily I was able to get my sharp knife down in between these two halves and manage to split them open. And I suppose I would have removed the seed if I could, but getting rid of it the next time will be just as good. Now, oops. Next thing I want to drop in here, and we're almost done actually, is a little bit of my grit. Sprinkle this stuff in to help the worms use it in aiding their digestive systems. And well, not much left to do other than cover up the feeding zone. Here I believe we're going to do our best to agitate all this leafy matter that had been sprinkled out onto the surface down into the bed. The stuff's been under the plastic coverings, and it all seems to have a nice moisture content to it. And what did I just hit here? I knew it. It seems sensible to believe that we would eventually, run into that other piece of the mango seed husk, but you can see how much smaller it is than the other piece. This piece didn't even get any seed in it, from what I can tell. Yeah, see, all that leafy matter getting in here. It's not overly dry, so it doesn't worry me that I'm gonna suddenly cause a crash to the system's moisture content. I actually think we're in pretty good shape here from that aspect. Except I've got to go a little bit easier here. I've got stuff flying off the flying off my gloves, I believe, as I'm swatting stuff around here, and some of it's ending up on the bench. Luckily I could just grab it and bring it back in. Hopefully not too much of it ends up on the floor, and hopefully none of it includes any wormies in it. So there's no need to be in a rush. We can just take our sweet old time, get these little guys covered up. Although at this point we are more or less done. So what I wanted to do after we backfill the feeding zones and blend in all this beautiful leafy matter is come back in here with my box of leaves and give the system a nice fresh coating of additional leafy matter, because if you think about it, that's almost the only bedding that they're getting, with the exception of the repurposed feeding zone indicators, which had replacements coming. So those went in here as a little bit of supplementary bedding. Well, if you think about it, all this leafy matter getting blended in, that's almost the best bedding that they can get. Stuff getting blended in everywhere, seeming to make a very cozy environment for the worms, or at least I like to think that they have a nice cozy environment. It seems that way to me. And one more feeding zone indicator. All right, let's get the box leaves out here, because it was fairly recently refilled. So we've got plenty to spare, and this is my chance to also use some of this stuff as sort of a dry wipey tool to help clean off my glove, return some of this lovely material that really does belong in the systems, not down the drain of my sink. So this is a great opportunity to return some of this stuff to the system, and saves me a little bit of time cleaning up over at the sink. Alright, if you ask me, I think that looks really nice. Very similar to what they got last time, right? We took some fruit that was chopped in half. We even gave them bread last time. That was another consistent thing. Leaves getting spread out across the top. I guess the upgrade today is a full-size feeding zone indicator rather than just half of one. Alright everyone, that's it for the check-in. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.